Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to discuss what I think are the 5 steps that could lead to someone having fibromyalgia. And I came up with these 5 steps from my own experience, things that I observed about myself, as well as things that I have read in my research about my condition. So I will be looking down because I made some notes. And I think that there are 5 things that lead to fibromyalgia in a consecutive order. And in the description below, I will put a link to a paper that had something to do with it. Not necessarily the paper that made me come to that conclusion, because I read quite a few, but the one that really made sense to me. So I will list the 5 things and then we will start talking about them. So the first is a genetic disposition. Second, a pain stimulus. Third, a hypersensitive brain. 4, reactive oxygen species accumulation. 5, insomnia. And 6, a reintroduction of the pain or the stimuli. So number 1 is genetics. And if you notice your own self having fibromyalgia, maybe your mom had it, maybe your grandma, maybe a cousin or an aunt, an uncle, or someone very close to you, or maybe your daughter or your son has fibromyalgia. So what research has found is that there's not a single specific gene that causes fibromyalgia, but there are different groups of genes that are maybe responsible for pain perception or your ability to handle pain or tolerate pain. And so they noticed that there were discrepancies in these genes compared to a normal person. When they compared people with fibromyalgia with a normal person, they noticed that these genes had a different expression than somebody that did not have fibromyalgia. And if you notice in your own family, there are usually clusters of fibromyalgia patients. So first thing that will make you predisposed to fibromyalgia is your genetic makeup. First of all, I think not necessarily you will get fibromyalgia if you have this genetic makeup, but it's a very good possibility. With all the ingredients of a perfect storm, you could get fibromyalgia. The second in that cascade would be a pain stimulus. Now, this is where it gets a little bit sensitive for most people with fibromyalgia. The pain stimulus can be a trauma from their childhood, some type of PTSD that they didn't think about all the way into their adulthood that they left in their subconscious. It could be stress from your job or just life or just these 2 years in general. And then finally it could be an illness, a chronic illness or an acute illness, some kind of painful illness. And usually patients with fibromyalgia usually have one of these things accompanied by fibromyalgia. It is called a comorbidity. And so I'm also curious to find out, like, how many people will start developing fibromyalgia that have survived COVID-19, given the acuteness of such a disease. But maybe in the next 5 years they will do some research and we can find out. Number 3. So imagine you are predisposed to fibromyalgia. Then you have some severe childhood trauma. Maybe you've been sexually abused, you grew up in an abusive home, there was some emotional abuse, physical abuse, something like that. Or you survived an acute illness, like a very bad flu, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr, something to that effect, COVID-19, or you have come off of some very incredibly stressful episode in your life, and then now your brain has been activated to respond to pain or respond to a stimuli. For example, imagine you were a child who grew up in an abusive home. Every time the abuser would enter the home, your brain would respond to this stimuli, and that would be something simple as a key in the door, or a knock on the door, or footsteps. So your brain will associate these sounds or sights with something that is threatening, or something that is frightening, or something that is dangerous. So now your brain begins to activate all your pain responses in your central nervous system. So you begin to have that part of your brain, they call it, I think, the lizard brain, that is responsible for your instinctive behavior, to always be active. I need to live, I need to live, I need to live. So you are in this heightened state all the time. And whenever your body goes into this heightened state, there's a physiological response. And this physiological response is involuntary, and it's just your body trying to protect you. And some of these responses include increase in blood pressure, increase in blood sugar, dilated pupils, contracted sphincters, anal sphincters, relaxation of the bladder, and dry mouth. So you could imagine like these reactions that are chronic, so it happens all the time, over time, how that could affect your body. For example, if you are feeling frightened and your mouth is always dry, you're always frightened, your mouth is always dry, there's no saliva, you could start developing mouth sores, or the relaxation of your bladder could give you the sensation of you wanting to pee all the time, or increase in blood sugar could use up all the glycogen storage, or most of it, in your body, so you're always craving sweets. And it was just coincidental to me that so much of these symptoms that you have that are short-term physiological response to the fight or flight response are fibromyalgia symptoms. So because of this, your brain is getting ready to run all the time. So it's not focused on anything else. Your stomach doesn't want to eat food. So, you're not hungry. Imagine feeling this all the time. Eventually it will end up to nausea. I think that having your brain being prepared to fight or flight at any given moment would induce brain fog, because actually you're not concentrating on a simple task that you're doing. You're concentrating on where can I run, how fast can I go, where is the out, subconsciously. So actually what you think could be brain fog is actually your brain getting ready to fight or flight. It could be other things too that I will talk about in my next point, and that's number 4, accumulation of reactive oxygen species. So keeping your brain and your body in this constant stimulus, ready to go, I'm preparing myself to feel pain, because now your brain is well rehearsed. I know what this is, I know what this pain, this looks like it's gonna hurt me, I know exactly what to do. Now your brain is always constantly at this state, so it's using up a lot of resources, it's using a lot of energy, and it's constantly kept in this state. In some research that I will link below next to this number, they found that these reactive oxygen species were damaging the cell membranes. These include mitochondria. Cell membranes include mitochondria, and cell membranes also include your gut lining, which which leads to another symptom of fibromyalgia, which is a leaky gut and mitochondrial dysfunction. They also found in another research that patients with fibromyalgia had the muscles, they did muscle biopsies, and they found that these people had a moth-eaten appearance. So their muscles were really raggedy, tore up looking. And of course, fibromyalgia causes what? Deep tissue pain, deep muscular pain. So it all started to come together for me when I started reading all these papers, and then I started connecting all these dots. The fifth in this cascade, which is really usually one of the things that come at any time in this list, is insomnia. And that would be from the stress you are experiencing, or it could be from the pain you are experiencing, or the overanalyzation of all the things that are happening to you in your life, or concerning the stress, the abuse, etc. It could be work abuse, because I know I've suffered from being bullied at work, and it really affected the way my symptoms were manifested, and it affected the way I slept. And when your sleep is interrupted, your body doesn't get time to rest and repair. So you can't sleep because you're in pain, and then you wake up the next day and then you're still in pain. So it's like a vicious cycle that doesn't end. And all this sleeplessness and pain causes anxiety and depression. And before you know it, you start having anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and the sleeplessness continues and the pain continues. Well, in the fibro world, they call it pain insomnia. So now you're in pain, then you get depressed, and then you get anxious because you're worried about your work and you perform, and then it's just a vicious cycle with just sleep or lack of sleep. And the final nail in the coffin that makes this a chronic illness is because now your brain is trained how to handle pain, how to handle something that is threatening. So it gets really good at it. And things that wouldn't normally cause a high intensity of pain becomes incredibly painful. Things that don't necessarily cause nervousness, or things that doesn't cause anxiety, it's heightened. Your brain is rehearsed. It is not your fault. It is involuntary. You did not pick this. You did not decide to do this. Your body is trying to protect you from that intense illness that you had, or that traffic accident, that trauma, that fall, that PTSD, that childhood trauma, that abuse at work, that constant stress. Your brain is now programmed to protect you. And now, at any cost, at the first sign of what your brain think is dangerous, it will start wiring and setting off all these pain signals. And then you're wondering, like, what happened? I mean, how did this happen to me? How did this happen to me? And that is where we go back to number one, that there is some genetic predisposition for fibromyalgia. I'm not saying that you can pass on fibromyalgia, but in all of the genes that we have, we are never born perfect. And most of the time, if we never encounter a situation to reveal an imperfection, we usually live a normal life. But in the case of fibromyalgia, if you are predisposed and one of these genes are compromised, and in the paper it will list all of the genes that are implicated in the cause of fibromyalgia, but not necessarily cause fibromyalgia, it will create the perfect storm, and you could develop fibromyalgia. So let's review the 5, I don't know what to call it, like the 5 steps that lead to fibromyalgia, or or the cause of fibromyalgia in 5 steps. 1, you are genetically predisposed. That means you have seen some type of fatigue or pain, chronic pain, illness in your mom, your grandma, cousin, aunt, uncle, grandfather, or some type of IBS symptoms, etc. Some type of chronic symptom, chronic disease. You've seen some type of chronic disease in your family member. Number 2, you then get introduced to a pain stimuli. It could be a childhood trauma, it could be an illness, or it could be psychological stress. But all of these things will lead to number 3, where your brain becomes trained involuntarily on how to handle pain. Your brain now sets you in fight or flight in a semi-permanent state. So you experience the flight or fight physiological response almost daily. And these in turn lead to the fibro symptoms such as IBS, constipation, frequent urination, poor vision, brain fog, fatigue, etc. I will also put a link below to the 200 plus symptoms of fibromyalgia, so don't worry. Because of your brain and your body doing all this work, you start creating reactive oxygen species. These are free radicals that destroy the cell membrane. One of the important cell membranes that I believe get destroyed is the mitochondria, and the other is the gut. Because in fibromyalgia, they find that the mitochondria is less in these people, along with moth-eaten appearance of their muscles, and it's always, most of the time, comorbid with IBS. They also found that the free radical scavenger that is naturally found in the body is reduced in patients that have fibromyalgia. So their free radical scavenger is working overtime, and it's still not enough. All these things together can cause an incredible damage, physical damage, that you can see to the body. Then comes the insomnia or painsomnia. And I put that at number 5, but actually, like I said before, it can be inserted in any part of this list. And the insomnia will lead to cognitive problems and mood disorders such as anxiety, depression, panic attack, and anxiety attack, and this will increase the pain, and that cycle will continue. And finally, your brain is just waiting for the stimuli to occur again. And every time it occurs again, it will occur in a lesser form. So number 6 is the reintroduction of stimuli. So maybe you had a childhood trauma that you thought you got over, but as soon as you started your first job in your 30s, after you finished school, there was that bully right there waiting for you, and your brain said, I can take it from here. 2 years later, you develop fibromyalgia and you have no idea where it came from. Your brain knows. It's been waiting and ready for this moment. So those are my 6 steps to fibromyalgia. This is my opinion. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a plant doctor, but a doctor nonetheless. And I hope that you have found this helpful. If you did find this helpful and you like more videos like this, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and you will see more from me. And until then, live well. Bye.